Communities and Service Center initiatives, investing in our people. We have two special guests here to do a briefing on Metroplex. And Jeff Davis, who's been an air traffic controller for 33 years and 5 years with MITRE. He'll explain a lot about what MITRE is, how Metroplex is tied with FAA, what's it all about. He's accompanied by Howie Talon, who I've worked with in the past over his MAC in our air traffic career. I wanted to thank all of you for being here, taking the time, your bosses and TMs and GMs who allowed you to come here and do this. This is a great, great experience. Hopefully you'll learn a lot. And this is an interactive type briefing, so you don't have to just sit there. If you have questions, you can raise your hand, ask a question. And then Jeff's going to probably throw some questions out to all of us to see what we know. But hopefully you'll enjoy this briefing, and with no further ado, turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Deb. Good morning, everybody. As Deb said, my name is Jeff Davis, and this is very loud. Retired air traffic controller from the United States Navy. I did 29 years in the service. Left that, did a few years DOD, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and then MITRE, which is an FFRDC, which I'm going to explain what it is in a minute, reached out and hired me, and I've been with them for 5 years. Specifically looked at my airspace background, my project management skills and stuff, and it would fit in perfectly with Metroplex. I got in the MITRE 5 years ago, right when Metroplex was kicking off. So I've been engaged with Metroplex 100% of my time for the last 5 years. To my right, going to help me and chime in is Howie Calvin. I'll let him introduce himself.
So I know a lot of you guys, some familiar faces out there in the room. I hired on with the FAA in 1982, and of course spent some of my formative months in Oklahoma City with Mac back there, running around Oklahoma City, having a great time. Went to Jacksonville Center, did just about everything down there, controller in several areas, spent a while in traffic management, quality assurance, finished up as an STMC, and then went to airspace procedures. I ran airspace procedures as the manager down there for the last 10 years at JAX. And got to know Lynn Ray, and through dealings with a number of things related to the early efforts for PBN and in the late 90s. And then I'm sitting down there fat, dumb, and happy. Fat, very fat, dumb, and sometimes happy anyway. At JAX Center, Lynn calls me one day. She says, "Hey, I've got this thing I want you to do up in Washington. We're going to do this airspace study for this thing we're calling Metroplex, right?" So I end up at Washington on the initial study team, myself and Marvin Burnett, which a lot of you guys are very familiar with. And from there, Lynn calls me down about halfway through one day and says, "Hey, I want you to meet me down in headquarters, like 4:30 in the afternoon." I'm going, 4:30? Who the heck meets at 4:30 in the afternoon, right? And she says, "I need your help. I need you to run the program." I said, "What? You got the wrong person. I can't do this." "Oh, I'll be right outside the door. It'll be just fine." Well, before I get there, Lynn gets promoted and heads up the road, and I spent 4 years at headquarters working for Dennis, okay, who was the airspace services director. Did Metroplex first couple of years as the temporary program manager. In the last year and a half or so, I was Dennis's senior advisor. So had a great time up there, and left there in May of 2014. I went to work for MITRE. Did an airspace project over in Dubai for about a year and a half, remote most of the time, internal airspace project. Had a wonderful time. And since then, I've been jumped back in and doing some behind-the-scenes support for Metroplex. Recently, took a group manager job, a group lead job at MITRE, supporting Metroplex. So I've got 8 or 9 of the folks that you guys deal with, like Dennis Sonderman and people like that, to work on our team. So. Having a great time, wonderful. Jeff and I are going to spend the morning here trying to explain to you guys MITRE, what we do, how we support Metroplex, or how we help you support Metroplex. Okay.
Thank you. And when Deb asked me a couple months ago, she reached out and she goes, "Hey, if you're interested in coming to the service center and doing a briefing," and a lot of people aren't familiar with Metroplex, what it is, and this national initiative that's going on, and even more so, a lot of people doesn't understand what MITRE, what an FFRDC is, and why you guys are so involved with Metroplex and supporting the process. So can you explain that? And I'm like, well, that's a couple of day evolution, but I can reduce it in a couple hours because we talk fast, so that's not a problem. I'm going to go over a couple things today, talk about what is an FFRDC, explain to you what it is. I got a short little video that I might have created last year on YouTube. Hopefully it works this morning. It's a very down and dirty, explains it better than I could as a human being, and I want to share that with you. To give you a little background about FFRDC and MITRE specifically. Then we'll talk about Metroplex, how Metroplex came into being, and the background about it, what we're doing in the NAS. The 5 phases of Metroplex goes along with the current 7100.41 on how to do implementations in the NAS. We're going to talk about the 5-phase process because that's what Metroplex was built on before the 5 phase was even adopted. Talk about the current projects that's ongoing across the NAS. There's been a lot of change going on over the last 3 or 4 months related to Metroplex and how we interact with airports and outreach. I want to talk about that because it's still ongoing, the changes. And questions I got at the end, but as Deb said, please interrupt. I want to make this interactive. I want you guys to get as much out of it as possible. And the only way you're going to do that is you interrupt and go, I don't understand that. You speak a different language. What's that mean? Tell me what you're talking about, and we'll break it down for you until we can get an understanding. Next, please. So an FFRDC. FFRDC is federally funded research and development company, or center, excuse me. There are tons of them out there in the world. A lot of them, I threw some names up here to give you some ideas of what's going on. MITRE obviously works in a lot of different of these arenas, but you can see some very knowledgeable or recognizable names with NASA and IDA and RAND, McNally, and all that kind of stuff. They are all FFRDCs. Why? Next, please. Let's see if this video will work. Hopefully we can get that. It's always great when you put on a spot, right? While that's loading and he's getting that to go in.
Have you ever flown in a jet, used GPS, taken shelter from severe weather, undergone cancer treatment, or marveled at the Mars rover? You probably didn't know it, but you were benefiting from the ideas and achievements of FFRDCs. FFRDC stands for Federally Funded Research and Development Center. FFRDCs are independent, not-for-profit organizations. They support our nation with a unique combination of technical expertise and unbiased advice. Compared to the government and industry, FFRDCs are small in size, but they have had enduring impact. They develop groundbreaking technologies, perform in-depth analyses, and help the government make cost-effective choices. The first FFRDCs began in the 1940s following World War II. Back then, the government agencies needed to build a critical mass of science and technology knowledge unavailable within their own ranks or the commercial sector. Those first FFRDCs focused largely on national security. Since then, the government has founded ones to tackle a full range of complex national and increasingly global issues, both military and civilian. FFRDCs differ from other companies that support the U.S. government. They follow a set of strict legal rules that govern their creation and operation. These regulations also provide guidance to the government agencies that sponsor them. FFRDCs are not-for-profit organizations, have no commercial conflicts of interest, don't manufacture or sell products, cannot work for commercial companies, and cannot compete with industry. These attributes are the foundation of their effectiveness. They allow FFRDCs to serve as trusted advisors to their government sponsors. They also enhance industry's ability to work with the government. In today's dynamic fiscal, political, and technology environment, meeting complex challenges head-on takes many resources, both public and private. Working together, achieving the right balance, FFRDCs help deliver the outcomes that make our nation stronger.
since it was back and forth there. FFRDCs are, we operate in the public interest. We're not for profit. The thing is we support long-term governmental issues and concerns. You can go to the next slide. MITRE's mission overall as an FFRDC is in the public interest. MITRE works in partnership with the government applying systems engineering and advanced technologies addressing issues that are critical to national importance. Sounds very ominous. Next, please. MITRE is, most of the people in the FAA associated that are familiar with MITRE are familiar with our Center for Advanced Aviation System Development. MITRE is actually, that's one of the smaller centers within MITRE. There are 7 centers in MITRE that are all independent FFRDC supporting the government in different means. Briefly, National Security Engineering Center works with the Department of Defense. The Homeland Security obviously works with Homeland. Center for Enterprise Modernizations actually works with the IRS and let's see, TSA as well. National Cybersecurity is that judiciary works with the legal system, and CMS Alliance for Modernized Healthcare works with the National Healthcare System. So you can see MITRE is across many spectrums. We're going to talk about CASI today because CASI is what supports the FAA initiatives and the work there. I'm not going to read all this to you. MITRE's been in existence for 50 years. We've been supporting the FAA throughout that 50 years, but formally stood up the CASI FFRDC in 1990. Became a ticket item at that time frame. We provide technical capabilities of system engineering. Remember the not-for-profit. Remember that we do not compete. That's what makes us unique in what we provide, because the government pays for us to tell them analytical, data-driven answers, whether they want to hear it or not. So we deliver good and bad news, but that's what we're there for, because we're not trying to compete. We're not trying to develop a product.
Yeah, I think one of the things, like I told you guys, I've been with MITRE for a year and a half, and of course I worked with them for many years. I mean, starting way back with Jacksonville Center, way back in the early 90s, but we're different. MITRE works in the public interest. We're not out for profit. We're not out to compete for contracts with other contractors. We're all about sitting with the FAA and working to make the system better, even if it means finding a way to give business to other people to make that happen. You know, it's kind of an interesting role that we play, and it takes a little bit of time to get into that role actually with MITRE, but it's very interesting.
It's a fine line we walk a lot of times and stuff. When there are some key things that we have to be very astutely aware of. If there is a civilian company that comes up there and develops a process or a technique or a tool that mirrors what MITRE does, then we can't compete. So we have to allow that. If we develop something that's for the betterment of the NAS, regardless of what it is, we do what's called technical transfer. We transfer that to a company that can then own it and process it, because then it's a business-related type issue. So really think MITRE's biggest pull is our continuity, strategic development. What we do in that arena is what our biggest task is. MITRE's unique. The majority of MITRE employees are what we call second-termers, coming from industry on the pie chart here, coming from prior backgrounds, so they have built up technical expertise in a field before joining MITRE. And you can see the large group of what we have for employees come from existing sources. Howard and I are great examples. Both of us had careers in air traffic in different fashions and stuff, and MITRE actually seeks out those type of people to bring in and bring that experience to the table to help continuing to evolve what we as an FFRDC can bring to the table. You look at the mature judgment, almost half of our workforce has 20+ years experience in whatever field that they're supporting. The technology technical majority of all of us have some form of systems engineering background. MITRE itself as a company really prides itself on its academia, on its knowledge that goes through there. You can see that a doctorate level, and there are people at MITRE that have multiple doctorate degrees in their fields and stuff. Over half of everybody at MITRE, I think it's 62%, if I remember the numbers right, has a master's degree or higher. How we are a little unique.
Yeah, we're unique.
We fall in the smaller category.
Dr. Davis, Dr. Cal. But seriously, I mean, one of the first meetings I went to after I got on board with MITRE was like walking into the tent in the Spies Like Us movie, you know, and doctor. And Jeff is correct. The academia is very apparent there. You know, everything we do, we capture in a technical report or a paper, and it's all about advancing the science. It's about advancing the knowledge. We've got a wonderful tracking system, an internal reference system called the MEAN, and we can easily access all the previous documentation and analysis that's been done on our particular subject, and it really helps us from having to repeat a lot of the same mistakes and relearn a lot of the same material.
That's probably the biggest impression I got coming from my background going to MITRE. I walked into MITRE not knowing what to expect really, and first tasking was, hey, welcome to MITRE and stuff. You got 30 days. I want you to develop the design process for this Metroplex thing that we're going through there, and let us know when you're done. I'm like, what? You want me to do what? So they said, oh yeah, look at the Me online. It's a technical resource within MITRE. It crosses all the lines of the FAA. You can find any information you want. And I started researching. I'm like, wow, absolutely is there. You can find every initiative that's been started with the FAA, every kind of work that we've done, every kind of work that FAA and MITRE has done, and it's just ready resources. It makes life a lot easier and gives us a unique position within the industry. Things that we come across here that talked about long-term continuity. That's something we bring to the table that no contractor can do because they're out there competing for business, and if their business is going to change according to what the needs are out there. We're there consistently. Core function of architects development, technical strategy, program strategy, program execution, enterprise systems engineering. This is, I always talk about it, this all fits into the trusted advisor role that was talked about earlier. We're there to tell the FAA, you know, possibilities. Here's something that works, here's something that doesn't. Here's things that has worked for you in the past. Here's analytical data that will tell you that this may or may not work. And we hand it off and let the FAA make educated decisions based on the work that we are looking in the background for. That's an FFRDC and MITRE in a nutshell. Questions?
Other than airspace, what do you guys have your hand in?
Say again?
Other than airspace, what do you guys have your hand in?
Uh,
Products that you guys produced?
Any line of business that's in the FAA, we've been a supportive a part of it. Let's think. URET was developed by MITRE. It was something that came up and developed it. Tell me, what else?
Well, yeah,
UAS development that's in the NAS. It's a big hot topic going on. We have a whole department set aside that supports unmanned air systems in the NAS, helping with the policy development, helping with that. Stuff in the swim and so forth.
We're broken into a number of different outcomes, right? And our outcome happens to lie in PVN and aerospace centric. We've also got safety, a lot of work done with things like SIAS, ADSAP. We've got NextGen's got a whole outcome.
Airports, service,
yes.
all of
We
that.
basically support just about every facet of the FAA, Andres, in one way or another. And we try and pride ourselves on a lot of cross-domain pollination out there so that we can help the FAA in breaking down some of those stovepipes between different organizations out there. We certainly do a lot of interaction, a lot of discussions back and forth to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts and also that we're avoiding gaps that are out there.
That unique assets helped. Recent example is TVFM. TVFM, separate program, separate line of business for the FAA. When we started Metroplex and we're going through there was questions from the facilities about TVFM. We helped bridge that gap. We developed TVFM. capabilities in our ideal lab back in MITRE that's expedited. I'll talk about that later on in the presentation, but there's a plethora of examples. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
What's TPFM for the folks who don't know what that
Time-based flow management. It is a systems tool to help with the arrival flow into an airport, major airports. It is a tool that the company uses so they can get that sequence into the airport in a fashion to reduce the delays in those areas.
So just a little follow-up. I mean, metering's been around for a long, long time, way back when, you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, we had metering set up in the host at Jacksonville Center, right? But TBFM or TMA in particular is built upon that improvement. Like Jeff says, we initially focused on not overfeeding an airport, right? Making sure we got the right radio in airport. Our application and our big use of TBFM and Metroplex has been to assist in being able to space aircraft to leave aircraft on fuel-efficient PBN procedures as close as we can from top to top of descent. So we'll shoot to stagger or not overfeed a fix where we might have multiple procedures coming together to fix. We'll establish parameters for something like an arrival stream class filter out there to enable us to leave more aircraft on the procedure from top to descent.
That helps both air traffic and industry. It helps air traffic with their test capacity. You know, it makes their job easier. It helps industry, one, with their business case with fuel consumption, but even more so important in my mind is operationally, it's easier in the cockpit for them. Because they program in the flight plan, they put in the descent profile, they sit back and watch.
Yeah, TBFM's actually been, you know, when we first started Metroplex, I kind of saw it as a kind of a side effort for us, and we reach out and interface with them as we needed to. But actually, it's a much more integrated effort, and there's been a lot of Metroplex resources thrown at TBFM to help enable the PBN-based procedures and usage of those things. As we move ahead, we're going to look further at new tools such as path stretching and well, eventually we'll get to TSAS, but before that we're going to do ground-based flight interval management and then flight-based interval management to start to even more refine that sequencing capability. And then eventually the terminals come on board and we actually use TSAS. TSAS, terminal spacing and sequencing. I think we initially rolled out to 8 or 9 sites as early as FY19. And that's where we'll really start to see, hopefully, a much more consistent and greater use of short, defined final approaches with RF turns or TF turns that mimic RF turns.
Anything else about a FFRDC or what MITRE is, what we bring to the table?
Sorry for getting us off topic there, Joe.
That's okay. No, we got time. I want to make sure. Yes, sir.
All these things you just mentioned, are those things that MITRE has developed and is presenting, or are those things that asked MITRE to develop?
To answer your question is both. Some of the stuff is strategic stuff that we've helped develop. Some of it is the FAA's had ideas and come to us and go, how do we deploy? What's the best way? Are we looking at all this? So we've been a participant in one shape, fashion, form for all of them.
Or integrating a capability with existing capabilities or other capabilities that are coming along. Like I said, the TBFM and Metroplex is an example of that.
There's a lot of work in the IDEA lab is in MITRE in McLean, Virginia. There's a large suite of to be set up to duplicate en route or TRACON facilities. And a lot of this new technology we're talking about, PSAS and stuff like that, the FAA brings in and brings controllers from different facilities and going, hey, here's a new technology, this is what we're trying to do. So it gives them a chance to give some hands-on and some real feedback to the thinkers of, you know, we're developing this, here's a nice concept, we think this will work, but until you get a controller in there actually, you know, playing with it, then you really start to get a evolution of something that can be developed and put into the field. Anything else? So let's talk about Metroplex. Metroplex has went through a couple of name iterations. 5 years ago, Metroplex.
So Apple, Jeff.
And It was then changed to OAPM, Optimization of Airspace and Procedures in the Metroplex, which was really a defining term for Metroplex and what we do, because we focus on PBN procedure development and airspace modifications to support that PBN development for airfields on a geographic location. But a lot of people, after I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years of doing it, they go, man, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's just too much to say when we're up briefing, or we're talking to Congress and we're going through next gen stuff. Let's go back and call it Metroplex. It's just so much simpler.
Yeah, actually, that was, you know, when we first started down the road, we had Big M Metroplex and Little M Metroplex, right? Big M was everything in next gen that dealt with their Metroplex portfolio, right? And then Little M was the airspace and procedures aspect of that, PDN procedures, airspace. And so that's, like Jeff says, how we ever got to OAPM. And initially, Horta Michael was cool with OAPM, you know, and then at some point, like Jeff said, we're sitting in a meeting one day and he says, this is just ridiculous. Let's just start calling it Metroplex. So the administrator says call it Metroplex. We call it Metroplex.
So Metroplex really, it focuses on a large geographic area, loosely based on when this first came up 5 years ago. RTCA Task Force 5, which I'll talk about in a second, had some recommendations for the FAA on how to fix some issues, historical issues in the National Airspace System. And one of the things that came out of it is Metroplex, and Metroplex really focuses on a large airspace. Historically, when we did procedure redesigns in the NAS, we would look at an airport and look at changing either arrival departures into an airport, and would negate the impact that it has on adjacent airports, adjacent airspace and stuff. And so sometimes, you know, when you created a procedure that was great for one thing, it had negative impact on other stuff, and you didn't realize it until it deployed and it was out there. So based on RTCA, the industry feedback said, hey, you ought to look at this more holistically. So you don't sit there and keep deploying these things to one location that has a positive impact and has negative impact on another. And so the genesis of going, well, look, I have a geographic area. I mean, all the airports in that geographic area. So we're not doing that. So we're taking a better step at optimizing the flows coming into it. So it looks at new construction, looks at the economic regulatory measures, and looks at the technologies that are available now and within 5 years of the project. And all that is done by changing the procedure and airspace associated with the procedures.
So originally we started out, we looked at the Core 30, right? We wanted to encompass every airport that was in the Core 30 and bring Metroplex PBN-based solution sets, right, to those airports, right? So there was some initial groupings that fit together. Obviously, you got 3 or 4 airports in the New York area that would belong as one Metroplex, right? There were some others that were natural groupings, like some of the Southern California airports, right? Northern California, and DC, of course, right? So we ended up with 21 Metroplex. We started out the road with 21 Metroplex. We used to have this waterfall chart when I was first doing Metroplex, and we'd come out, and many of you guys saw the initial waterfall chart with 21 sites on there. We were going to have them all done by, I think, 2017. We ended up in a big fight with the IG about that. That did anyway. But we came out to the service center, and the service center said, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of stuff going on there. You know, and as you guys get to implementation, we got a lot of irons in the fire. So we went back and looked at how can we reduce the number of places we're going to, the sites we're going to. So that's where we ended up with some more of the natural groupings. The groupings that we did like Cleveland and Detroit, we held it to one. We rolled all the Florida facilities into one. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. We'll find out here pretty soon, but we got them all together. And Deb's shaking her head there. And then we looked at some places where PBN already had projects that were underway that were going to produce similar benefits we were doing. Vegas was one, Denver was one, Minneapolis was one. Now we've since gone back and decided, hey, we can really improve some of the benefits of some of the procedures at some of those places, and that's why we're visiting Denver and Las Vegas now. But initially, we ramped down to 13 sites, and I think that's about where we're at now. We've had some things fall off the list, like Boston and Memphis.
Well, it's 12 sites. We'll talk about that, what they are and why, a little bit later on. So Metroplex, I talked about a little bit RTCA Task Force 5 recommendations that came out in 2010, I remember,
2009.
2009, and they were coming out going, hey, here's some recommendations of the FAA, let's fix some stuff. And it focused on integrating approaches for PBN procedure-based navigation into the airport's RNAV development. Look at large-scale airspace redesign projects and explain why. Then we looked at prioritizing the projects based on the waterfall Howard was talking about and based on things that were all ongoing in the NAS. And said, hey, we'll use the annual PBN production goals as part of that plan, and this created Metroplex.
You got a question for me?
Yes, ma'am.
I always wonder why is Las Vegas a Metroplex project? Because I don't consider that a big Metroplex, like Boston or New York. So why was Las Vegas chosen?
Well, because besides the airport complexity, it is still one of the core 30 airports. They have an immense amount of traffic, which surprises a lot of people. Vegas came on late. Vegas wasn't an initial waterfall. Vegas came because the NIWG,
Well, actually, remember, I told you there were places we fell off the list because they had ongoing PBN projects. So they had Opti, if you're familiar with Vegas optimization, right? And it was a rather large-scale project that was going to move a lot of airspace around, create dual feeds at a couple of different corner posts.
introduced PBN for the airport fully.
OPDs, basically. They've had a what we call, what we call rudimentary PBN procedures today, with no altitudes or anything. They've had those for years at Vegas. But Opti, for a myriad of reasons, wasn't implemented. So we got to this point where we weren't doing any improvements at Vegas, and we'd taken them off the Metroplex list because Opti was there. So there was a lot of user pressure, and through the next-gen integrated work group that Jeff's talking about to revisit Vegas and actually deploy a study up there. Now, we recently completed a study at Vegas, and actually it toned down a lot of the Opti procedures and airspace changes that were originally suggested, but we still show significant benefits on the table at Vegas. So it's in the hands of AJV1 right now, I think, for final approval.
Correct.
Design and implementation.
And when we talk about the current status, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But 2014, industry went to the FAA and going, Opti's been ongoing now for 4 years, no actions taking place, we need help. The FAA did a quick study on what the status of Opti was, what the issues were. They came back and said, Opti's not moving, we recommend you consider Metroplex. There's a program and process, national level in place, it can get started. And that's where we are. RTCA, Task Force 5 recommendation, it came out and was going, hey, we really want the FAA to look at area navigation, RNAV, for the airports. We want the performance-based navigation structure in our airports, not just major, they want it in most of the airports. And we're looking at enabling that technology as a key building block to support all the other next-gen initiatives, because a lot of the next-gen initiatives are based on PBN in the airports. The actual recommendations that became the foundation for Metroplex on the board going to focus on major metropolitan areas. Let's go big first and then go into smaller sites as we roll this out into the NAS. Optimize the flight paths. We're looking at cleaning up the climb and descent profiles. A lot of the airports and procedures are built on 30, 40, 50-year plus designs. Aircraft have changed, performance has changed, equipment has changed. All that, those changes, trying to get the biggest bang out of the buck for industry side and air traffic evolving with equipment. A lot of those procedures are antiquated. They had built-in level offs. There were targets taking them out way farther than they should be and stuff. So let's expedite that.
Yeah, so, obviously a lot of you in this room have been doing this for a long time, right? And I have too. But one of the biggest inefficiencies we find that we can cure with Metroplex is the interaction between the center and the trigger. Every place where we've built procedures over the years, we cross 30 out at 11,000 feet, 250 knots, right? What we do, when you turn that profile on the side and look at it with a rates or PR's grade, and you always see that level off at the TRACON boundary out there, because they're going to level off 5 or 6 miles before the fix usually. The TRACON is going to wait until they get close to the airspace boundary there or inside before they start them down. So we see these level offs at the TRACON boundary. So optimizing flight paths just with an OPD, you can eliminate that, and those are huge savings out there. What we found is that the newer, what we call slippery airplanes, right? Particularly 737NG, I've flown a lot by Southwest, right? And there's a few other carriers out there flying this. They can't do those profiles that they used to do. I remember, and Dennis will remember, back when we were in Charleston a long time ago, we're designing OPD stars for Charleston for the Air Force, right? And of course, U.S. Airways and Delta joined in. Grady shows up and helps us with a little bit with it. And everybody's basically happy with what we're doing. They can handle the profile. At the last minute, Southwest is moving into South Carolina. This is probably what, that's 2007, 2008, something like that. Yeah. And Southwest shows up and says, we can't fly that profile. We can't get the airplane there. And what we ended up doing was actually had to take airspace from Columbia Approach Control and a little shelf airspace to make the profile flatter. And that's the first time, that I really had to deal with flatter profiles. But we're seeing that all over the country. And that's something where Metroplex is really comes in handy, because you're already talking to the surrounding facilities, right, about trading airspace to make the PBN procedure more efficient. So.
And that leads perfectly to the next bullet, the bullet about collaborative teams. So look at this and going, in order to make this work, we need everybody that's engaged or involved with a procedure development or airspace to be part of the decision factor, to be in there with their sleeves rolled up. Historically, you could have an airline develop a procedure, submit it into the NAS without ATC looking at it until it gets into the approval process. You have a facility develop one, put it in there without checking with industry if it suited their needs as well, or if they were able to fly it, for lack of better terms. So we definitely started off, and still to this day have air traffic management, NACA, and industry all as part of the design teams to create these procedures so it meets everybody's needs. It's very interesting to watch the collaborative process. These teams start out, and there's some very rigid thinking from the facilities a lot of times, and how we talked about it a bit with the TRACON and en route facilities. They get their own little rice bowls going on. The lead carrier that operates at the airport has their philosophy on how it should be, and they start talking, and you really find out lots of times they're all working towards the same thing, just different perspectives. And it's really, really evolved. I think one of the side benefits we're seeing out of this collaborative teams are the facilities that work day in, day out together, but are at different facilities, different locations. There's an improved working relationship that comes out of this because they're in a room talking about what works for them, what doesn't work for them. It seems very common sense, but it's been a very nice step and a nice benefit from it.
You guys remember, as we started Metroplex, we were busted apart. En route reported up one way, and terminal reported up another way, and there wasn't as much interaction, as there used to be way back when, and actually we've got now. So it's been a big part of this project, and we spend a lot of money on it. There's a lot of criticism about the money we spend to get facilities together and spend time designing these procedures, but we think in the long run it pays off.
Then we, next bullet, looking at RNAV everywhere and RMP where practical. This talks to the PBM procedures, and RNAV is area navigation for procedures coming either to and from the airport, STARS or SIDS. What RNAV does from the old conventional procedures is the predictability or repeatability of the flight paths they are is so accurate, and we're finding it may be too accurate, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. 8 miles wide coming into the airport on the old conventional procedures. You throw an RNAV procedure, and now it's down to 2 miles. It's like I always tell the teams when we're starting out, you're growing airspace. They're not increasing the size, their footprint any. They're just getting some clean airspace because of the predictability of these procedures that develop. It gives them some flexibility, it gives them room to do their job, and really put them on a direct path to and from as much as possible to the airports.
So a lot of the places in the eastern region, eastern service center, right, or eastern service area, and particularly in the old southern region, right, we're coming in with Metroplex, and we're in many cases we're improving the RNAV procedures. And I'm talking mainly SIDS and STARS that are already there, because I mean there was a lot of work done even before Metroplex on getting those things out. It's not that way across the country. I mean, we're at Cleveland, Detroit right now. And we just finished design up there. I think between Cleveland and Detroit, we have one RNAV procedure for SIDS and STARS. Everything else is conventional, you know. And of course, nobody out there is flying those procedures conventionally. Nobody's dialing in the VOR. They're all flying them with their FMS, and it looks just like an RNAV procedure to them, but we don't have the efficiencies of speeds and altitudes and things like that.
So it's quite a dramatic difference there. And so Cleveland, Detroit's projected to get some of the largest benefit of any project because they're really going from one paradigm shift to another on how to get in and out of the airports. Integrated airspace in the procedure design, there's been different philosophies, there's different projects on how that's interpreted. We said designing procedures to get the best benefits and adjust your airspace to support those benefits. Some facilities took that on board, some facilities like, well, we don't want to change that much because, you know, those are historical, so it really depends on how deep they got into it. All of the projects changed the airspace in some shape, fashion, or form, some more than others. Decouple the operations arriving department of adjacent airports. Seems like a simple thing, but it has made massive operational impacts at some of these metroplexes. When you stop and think, we're historically, because you have flow coming from the northwest into your area for a couple of airports, and you mix them all in there. There's always that separate them in different types and different aircraft characteristics. Now we separate those flows, so you have small jets going into your nice executive airport, and your air carriers coming into your major cores, and those flows are decoupled. It makes the job 100 times easier, and it actually helps each of those different types of performance characteristics, so they're not getting delayed because of one or the other. It makes a big difference. The last one, use 3 miles of terminal separation rules wherever possible. This goes into 3 miles is a normal terminal separation rule, 5 miles is a normal en route rule. There's been some changes to the system of going. We can use 3 separating to 5 going into some en route, depending on agreements and so forth. It just allows you to put a little bit more aircraft in the airspace depending on the circumstances. Questions on these recommendations? Anybody?
So I'm kind of a visual person. Like see more air traffic controllers sitting in this room. Explain a legacy procedure, and use your hand.
Okay.
How they would
I have to
come in from the route to terminal, and the difference of optimal profile descent arrival.
Okay. Well, let me paint a picture then. That's good. We'll do it 2 ways. I think everybody gets a level on the old conventional and stuff. They come from all different areas trying to get to the airport and stuff. Whereas on an RNAV optimized profile, they're on a rail, like following a subway track or a train track and stuff. So that's the lateral piece. The vertical piece, which I believe where Deb is going to get me to go, before on the old conventional procedures and stuff, think of a stair step. Wherever there was something in the system coming in, they had to stop for it. We're stopping, how we talked about going from terminal to en route airspace. There was always, almost always, a level off because you're handing off from one facility to the other. They wanted them in a predictable profile that they knew every time, regardless of what circumstances is, if he's going to be level there at 20,000 feet, or 12 or 10, whatever the case may be. And then every time you had any kind of perceived conflict, there was another little stair step coming down. So the old conventional procedures would come in and they would literally just stair step all the way down. Controller would have to issue every one of those level offs. He's issuing a different instruction, you know, descend and maintain flight level 230, descend and maintain flight level 190, descend and maintain 12,000, so forth and so on, all the way down to get that stair step going so he can do his job, he or she can do his job. Now you put them on OPDs. Now you're giving them what we call a descend via clearance. And you have an anchor altitude, usually down at the downwind airspace. You have a top of the descent of where you're going to get that. You issue one clearance. You issue the descend via, and then that aircraft is on a rail coming down vertically to the airport based on that aircraft's performance, its characteristics. So you'll have them in different levels or different areas. But the controller knows that window that they're going to be in. Now he's not issuing 10 clearance. One of our prototype facilities, the Washington Metroplex, we looked at, we did way early, trying to get an idea how this was going to be. The Freedom going into DCA, well, historically before they built the Freedom, its predecessor, I don't even remember now, it's been a while. And I worked there for, sorry. Anyhow, its predecessor had,
LD.
thank you, the LD had 8 transmissions in route alone for those levels. 8 times it probably had to go descend. Today they make 1. So the workload obviously is immensely different. It gives them more time to provide safety, looking at other things, more task complexity somewhere else. Controllers almost always fight this because they're like, I don't want this, they don't have a warm fuzzy because it's paradigm shift. You're expecting me to think of a tube of airspace now, I know exactly where it's going to be. As soon as they work it, so far I haven't heard anybody that's worked it more than a couple months ago.
Well,
This is awesome.
well, you know, I mean, as many years in the control room at Jack Center, I got my change resistor merit badge, I'm telling you. Because that's what we do as controllers, we resist change, we're pretty darn good at that, okay? But one of the things, just piggyback a little bit on Jeff, I mean, use an example of one in Orlando. We have a pretty good sized sector out east of Jacksonville, right north of Long Beach, going to Orlando. Actually, we gave them airplanes that come over at, back in my day, 31 out there, you know, but nowadays they're coming over flight level 340, right? And we give them cross Llama at 12 and 250, right? And they plan their descent. They could plan their own descent for 12 and 250 at Llama, but that's as far as the FMS would plan it. And it was very efficient until you got the Llama, but after Llama, man, it would level off and it'd be stair step all the way down. But now what the FMS can do, it knows where there's going to be occasionally a hard altitude, but we certainly shoot for windows where we can, where we don't have to level people off. And the FMS can plan an efficient descent all the way down to the downwind. So that's where those savings are.
Makes a huge impact. One for them, for their, I don't want to say we don't care about the business side of it, the fuel consumption, because we do in some aspects. It reduces their fuel cost, which reduces the CO2 emissions, so it's a greener air type thing. But it also reduces noise, which I want to talk about later in this presentation.
Noise, we're not going to talk about noise.
Yeah, we're going to talk about noise. Any other questions about this? Next. Mission of Metroplex: to identify and address operational issues through the application of performance-based navigation procedures and airspace changes. Stuff we've talked about quite a bit already. We're looking at, and I talked about predictable, repeatable flight paths. It's amazing what you get from doing that. Reduce the air traffic control task complexity, maximize efficiency. This is the process we go through to do it, and we'll talk more about that in the 5 phases. Next. These are the things that we really focus on to try to do these projects. We do a systems approach at the beginning of this. So we're looking at the whole system that we're impacting, the geographic area. We're looking, the geographic focus confines that systems approach on how we're doing it. And the backup systems approach is more of what is in the system now and what's going to be there 3 to 5 years for that Metroplex. So we take into account, hey, you're going to get GIMS in 3 years, so we want to build towards that tool being deployed in the system. Expedited process, I say this a little tongue-in-cheek now. Metroplex came out and its big selling factor was we're going to do these large airspace redesign projects and we're going to do it in 3 years, which is unheard of.
Sure, but some of that's due to the first one, right? When we first came along,
Yep.
of course, we're building, we're out there integrating, and I mean, we spent a lot of time at this headquarters. We're out there looking, hey, where's ERAM going? Where are they going to be done? Where can we come in right behind? Of course, what happens to ERAM, you know? So all of a sudden, our expedited process was affected by things like that, things like a little bit of a government shutdown here and there, and 17 days off, and late 13, I think we had. Those kind of things. Those are all things that, of course, a number of internal problems too that have caused us. Our expedited process doesn't look quite as expedited as it did when we first started out.
And going back into how we talked about the prioritization, which is coming up 2 bullets per hour, and when we were forced to combine some of those things, and then you just think the actual scope of the project, Florida is an immense project. So obviously it won't fit into the original thought path of a 3-year project because it's just too much work. Climate routines we talked about, the prioritization we talked about, predictable and repeatable. I think I'd be all age with air traffic focused on safety and efficiency of what we are doing. So it has to be a linchpin on what we're doing for each of these projects. I'm going to briefly this a lot, but I just wanted to show how maybe we were a little ahead of our time. It worked out we were a little ahead of our time. Way back when, 2003, we used to follow the 18-step process for putting in procedures. Again, fellows over at Denison, Randy lived, eat, and breathed this along with Howie and myself, going through this 18-step process in order to get anything implemented. There was talk in the late 2000s about we're going to go to this 5-phase process. It's a lot better. It's easier. MITRE, going back, MITRE was part of that development of the 5-phase process. So we said, let's get ahead of it. Let's do Metroplex in the 5 phase. So before the actual order come out in 2014 on the 5-phase process, we built our system based on that philosophy. We still follow the orders, the old 7100.9, but we really set up our process for 5 days, expecting that eventuality to come in there, and that's really all this is telling me. We had some minor changes that were different from 5 days and what Metroplex process was, but we've evolved since then.
Any questions on this?
So this is the sausage chart. Sausage chart is a real quick eyeball of the 5 phases and how long is it expected to take to do one of these large redesign projects. The top in the blue was our original philosophy on, hey, this is what we do. This is how we expect it. We looked at historical projects. We looked at historical implementations. And we based our process on that. If you go to the far left, your far left, studies covenant is a 3-month phase. I'm going to talk about it more, but it is an outside look in. We bring in experts from outside of the facilities and outside of the airspace that we're working to look at it, so they don't have any predisposed ideas about how to do business in that site, and come up with some recommendations, suggestions on how to address the issues that are brought up, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Then we go into the creative genius part that is where the large scale of work is for these projects is the design and procedure development. That's where the teams, the collaborative teams talked about earlier, get into rooms and have animated discussions and arguments and creative resolutions come out of those, and they come out and have some very nice designs from that process. We move into the operational environmental piece, which is the eval phase. It is by far our largest linchpin in the process and our least manipulative, because that is where the lion's share of the work for the environmental assessment, we'll talk about a little bit later, the NEPA actions that support these projects happens. Implementation and training, I think it's funny, some people get confused in implementation, so we start that with done. Implementation is the work that goes up to actually implementing the procedures, so there's more than just turning on procedures. There's a lot of work that goes into getting them turned on that I'll talk about a little bit later. And that's 9 to 15 months that we planned. And then post-implementation, when we first started a little over 5 years ago now, thinking about this, we said we'll be about 3 to 6 months. And I'll talk about the work there. How are we doing as a program? Is on the bottom. Our 3-month study goal as an average has taken us almost 5 months now. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of circumstances about it, and I'll go into a little bit later. Our 6 to 9 month design is averaging 11 months for what we're doing in the field, so the timeline's a little expanded. A lot of that's to do with the scope of the projects. Some of them grew from our original thoughts. We originally thought a geographic area would have at most 1 in-group facility, 1 major TRACON. We have a lot of them that are, in Florida, is 7 major facilities that are doing it, to give an example. So that sort of blew our timelines a little bit. The 19 months of our environmental is strictly driven by the environmental action. There's been lots of things that have driven changes to it. So it's now having 19 months, like 12 to 18 months. And I'll be nice and voice my personal opinion. The rest of it's still too early to tell because we just got a couple of these projects totally finished, and I'll talk about that. Questions about the sausage chart?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr.
Can
Austin.
you expand a little bit on what is going on in that middle sausage there, with the operational and the safety review? I can understand what that environmental looking over and saying and doing there.
I'm going to go into that topic.
And all that.
I'm going to go into that. I'm going to talk about the phases and what kind of work goes on in each phase right after this. Speak it up. Anything else about the sausage chart before I jump into? Okay, study phase. Talked about it. It's outside look in. It's a small team normally. And like I said, it's the core team members are made up of people outside of the facilities. We usually have anywhere from 4 to 6 air traffic controllers with terminal and maneuver backgrounds from other major facilities that we take and come in to look at those airspace and procedures that are in existence. The process starts with, we go to these facilities and we sit there and go, hey, we're Metroplex, this is what we do, this is our mission, we're going to bring some people in from the outside to look at it. We want to know what your issues are. So we start off with what's called an issue matrix, and we give it to each air traffic facility. We give it to all the aviation stakeholders that fly in and out of those airports. And we ask them, hey, tell us what your issues are. From your perspective, what are your issues? And that starts the scope of work for what that study team looks at. It looks at what can we fix by doing PPM procedures? What can we fix by these redesign efforts? What is inside the scope of what Metroplex does? And let's start working on recommendations for that. Something new that we just added with the Las Vegas being our last project that we started, and I'm going to talk more about it at the end, is there's been a very dynamic change on what we call as outreach with communication to regional administrators, FAA Airport District Office, airport authorities, regardless of what flavor they are, for the airports we're touching base with. And in a smaller part with the community. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but we now ask those airport authorities to give us their issues as well. And it's to try to get ahead of what we historically as an agency have done wrong. I don't want to say wrong, because it beats NEPA laws, that we've done in a vacuum, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
So a couple of things here. What we do, one of the things we do as MITRE, before the team ever gets started, is we do a pretty thorough analysis of all the airports that are going to be included in the study area, right? We're looking for things like fleet mix, equipage levels, level offs, particular distances, all kind of things. So when the team starts, they've already got a healthy chunk of analysis that's been done for them before they get started. On the SMEs up there, Jeff talked about, we have 4 or 5 SMEs. These are independent folks. Usually we'll have a pretty healthy mix of management folks and NACA folks on the team for a study, okay? Much more than D&I is going to probably be more controller focused, but on the study we tend to have a few more managers on the team. And one thing the study does is the study, remember, becomes the scoping document for the whole project. Here's the D&I roadmap of the things you should take on as a design and implementation team, more locally focused. One of the things, bringing in people from outside the local area, helps you to see things that you may have worked with something for 20 years, and when you say, hey, that's the best way to do it, and somebody comes in and says, well, you've got if you move the couch the other way, everybody can see the TV better, that kind of stuff. I know it happened to me in Florida. It's been many, many years down there, and the study team came in 2012 and recommended some things that I went, geez, I wish I'd thought of that a long time ago. So, interesting concept.
These are the things that during the study phase that the team is looking to do and accomplish. They're going to identify and address the operational issues, and I'll tell you what the issues they get from the users, the traffic and industry there. And they look at, okay, what can we come up with that will enable predictable and repeatable flight paths? And that's by putting the PPM procedures normally. How can we reduce the task complexity, not just for air traffic, but for industry? If it's making it easier, if I'm a air carrier and I go in and I have a descent via OPD and controller tells me to descend via and I've got it plugged in and I hit execute and I'm done, his workload has changed. He focuses on other things. Same way with the air traffic controller. So how can we reduce that task complexity? There's other ways, but that's just an easy example. And we're looking to maximize the efficiency of that airspace and procedure to get the biggest benefits that we can for it operationally. Study teams, they're going to analyze and describe the operational challenges in the Metroplex. That's based partly on the site package, which I was talking about that MITRE creates prior to, and then it's based on this issue matrix input that they get from the facilities and industry, and they're looking at going, okay, what is the issues here? What do we need to look at?
But always focused on what our job is, right? Our job is PBN procedure development and airspace changes that we need to make to maximize the benefits of those PBN procedures. We'll see all kinds of stuff show up on the issue matrix that Jeff's talking about. You know, we can't get Hobie to answer the landline. We need 4 new sectors and another area at Yada Yada Center, those kind of things. Those things are usually well outside the scope of Metroplex. So the program office does some triaging and helps the study team determine where those boundaries are, and they should be focused on PBM procedure development.
It does some education with facilities and stuff, because it's very easy to see their perspective when you're going, we're a national program, we're here to help you, we're going to make things better, and even though we tell them this is the parameters, it becomes, always go, they start with their Christmas wish list. I want the display the tower kid. It has got nothing to do with affecting change with the procedures and the airspace. Develop notional airspace and procedure solutions. So they're going to come up with some recommendations on some PBM procedures to and from those airports. Look at the cost and risk, environmental, safety, etc. They have to balance creating these things with, are we introducing any additional risk? Are we making something worse? A good example is we're looking at a major airport. Everything comes from the east. There's always dogged by this medium-sized airport, this ASPN airport that's 5 miles to the east. We're going to change that. We're going to drive right over top of them and move everything for that ASPN airport 5 miles south. Okay, you cause harm by making one. So go back to the old philosophy of looking at one. You got to look at balancing those risks and those costs. So we don't want to harm one for the betterment of another. Provide recommendations to the decision makers. That's where the team there's several times during the study phase where they go back to the facilities and go, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're coming up. And that's giving them a chance to go, hey, this is a neat idea, you thought about this, but you didn't consider the overflights we have from airport A to B. We can't do that because of this. Great. It becomes, trying to define that scope a little better. Provide the notional solutions, analysis, data, and recommendations to the follow-on DNI team. So when they go through this whole process, we come up with the end product, which is a study team report that says, this is the scope of work we recommend. It doesn't just stop and you go, okay, DNI team, here you go. There is some education. When the DNI, once it's approved, as they stand up, we do all this training for the DNI team too. But part of that training is, this is how they come up with these ideas. This is how they come up with this philosophy. This is why they recommended these actions. So they're not second guessing and recreating the wheel when they jump into this. And it defines the scope for the design and implementation. Questions? Thank you. We have done 12 study teams to date over the last 4.5 years. The process is really, really well defined now. It is about 14 to 15 weeks, depending on holidays in there, is the best we can do for the study process and get all the work in there. We were tasked with, Vegas was the first one of going, the notional, let's make them a little more than notional. Define them a little better. Give those design teams a better heads up on these designs. We want you to take those designs further than just notional. That adds time to it. I like the idea. It worked really well with Vegas. The D&I team, when they come in, have a lot further head start than normally we give them. But that just adds time. So I could easily see the study getting expanded to incorporate more time for those teams to do that work, because that's really defining work further. And I put this up here to go, one of the hallmarks of Metroplex is documentation. It's a huge project, these are huge projects. They live for 3 years plus, and when we walk away from Metroplex and the facilities got it, it's so easy with turnover and staff changes and personality changes. A year after Metroplex leaves going, I don't like none of this. Why don't we change all of this? So we do all this documentation for multiple reasons. One of it is, though, is a legacy, I call it the rabbit trail from start to end of what Metroplex did and why, and we hand it off to facilities so they don't try to recreate the wheel for the wrong reasons.
So one of the big things that we've done when we started out is day one, right? We wanted to learn from our mistakes, right? And lessons learned, we've applied lessons learned throughout this process, and probably the study team is the biggest example of where we have morphed the process a great deal based on those lessons learned. And actually, like Jeff said, the study team's pretty much like clockwork now. We go out, we do the things like we talked about with the site package. We actually have flip-flopped 2 and 3 since we developed the slide. We actually bring those people in ahead of time. We give them the site package, we show them everything. They take time to learn about the airspace, what the mission is, things like that. We go out and handle the kickoff meeting with the facilities. Here's what we're here for. Here's what we're going to do. We actually do some pre-coordination with them about 60 to 90 days ahead of time at the big kickoff meeting. And we ask them, what are your issues? That's where we go to the issue matrix. We provided them with that ahead of time. They fill that out. That first meeting is generally all about defining the issues, right? Here's the issues. Make sure we understand it. We try and have a rule where you can't just throw up an issue and say, I don't like the way the Atlanta arrivals are coming from over volunteer, right? You've got to show us. Here's our data. Here's the data day we've got. We've got other days we've got. We want to see what are those interactions. So the study team fully understands that. Remember, we've got industry participating with us on the study team process, right? Okay. Then the study team is saying, hey, I understand the issues. Let me repeat those back to you. Here's what we've got. Okay. We're going to go off. We're going to go to begin to design those notional concepts to deal with those issues and introduce the PDN procedures, right? And the airspace change. So we come back for that second outreach with the facilities and said, here's what we heard you say. Here's what we think is a solution for some of those issues, right? Here's how we can solve that with PDN procedures, airspace change. And usually the facilities go, you didn't get it right, or the stakeholders say, that's not what we meant, right? So we go back after that second outreach and we refine the procedures based on the input we got from the facilities. It's a big lesson learned from us is, even though we send those independent study teams out there, right? It's the D&I folks, the facilities are going to implement, design and implement these procedures. So you've got to have them on board from the front end. You can't go design something that's not going to be compatible with what they think is the best way to do things. After the second outreach, we go back, we refine the procedures, we start to look at benefits and things like that. And then the third outreach, we're saying, hey, here's your problems, here's the solutions we've designed with your input, okay? And here's the final product. So we're going to pass this on to design and implementation. Once we get the nod from headquarters to proceed with the project, we'll come out of that with 150 slide PowerPoint, usually about an 80 to 100 page study team report that defines all the procedures, all the benefits and things like that.
Have you ever had a study team come up with this report and do the funding? You have to wait a while? And then in that waiting game, things have changed?
A couple times now. Phoenix is a good example. Florida is a good example. Phoenix, we went out and did the study team in 2012 because of funding, ERAM issues, the slide, the sequestration and stuff like that. Things occurred in Albuquerque and Phoenix when they go, we can't start the deal yet. We got the permission, turned around and said we're going to go back out. It was programmed to start about 9 to 10 months after the study team. At their request, let's slide. There was a Super Bowl, and there was some other stuff came on. They said, well, let's wait. Then the waterfall concept got an issue from programmatic, from the national perspective, going, okay, we think you've got to let us know when you're ready, and then we'll come back out. It ended up being over a year before it was ready. In the interim, the facilities go, some stuff we like, let's do ourselves now. And they put it in place, and that's a long story. It's caused some issues because of how they did it, not what they did. And then we ended up all right, you've changed the baseline, you changed what you had when we looked at, you've addressed some of the issues. We actually did, and this will remind you of, we did a real quick study of what was the study team report, what's the existing conditions now, is there still enough left on the table where that requires an action program to go in there and do? So if there's a couple less to go, yeah, they go ahead, okay, this is what's left on the table, what do you want to do? And they decided to go back out there. Florida is another example. Florida was more resource driven because it's such a huge, immense project. And then there was a couple of major things going on. Fort Lauderdale had a runway expansion. ERAM slowed everything down. Jacksonville, for some reason that facility was a pain. Jacksonville said, we can't do two national initiatives. We can't do ERAM, we can't get all this fixed with the automation piece and do Metroplex. We just don't have the resources to support it.
All their talent had left.
It became such a long period. It was almost 2 years from study to design, go back out there. We took a good month and went back out and visited facilities. We MITRE went and looked again. Has anything changed in the system? And actually, there have been very minor changes. So we went out and did due diligence with the FAA, with program officers, we went to the facilities, going, here's what study team report, here's the things we see that's changed. Is this accurate? And had that conversation with each of the facilities that were impacted and said, okay, we're good to go. Let's start and go through there. So there were minor changes, but didn't want to go in blind and recreate the wheel.
There was a question in the back, I'll repeat it. It said, what does the study team final documentation look like, Jeff?
There are currently 8 deliverables that go out to the study team from the teams at headquarters to document the whole process. There are 2 major documents that really drives it. One is the official study team report that Howard talked about, the 1680-page document that goes through what they did, the process, the issues, what the recommendations are, it and the business case, not the business case, the project proposal are what headquarters reviews and decides, do we move forward or not? Because the project proposal really takes an executive summary look at that study team report and goes, how much is it going to cost the FAA to do this? What are we looking at? What's the benefit the agency and the industry is going to get if we do this? And they make their decision based on those 2 documents. They go from it. There's, to document the process, the other 6 deliverables really are reference materials for the design team for when they start, so they don't recreate them. Any other questions on this? Next, please. So when we do the study team report, it goes up to AJP, one for the Director of Air Services for them to say yay or nay. They've come out and so far we've had 100% of yes, let's move forward and do a design. They say yes, then we start the design process. So we build on what the study team did in the design phase. Their task is now controllers from the facilities that are impacted stand up and are assigned to this Metroplex teams. There's a whole big support function that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes that stands up for it. And these massive work groups now are going to review and categorize the study team recommendations, look at their complexity, look at their dependencies, look at their benefits, and try to figure out, all right, how do I work this Rubik's Cube? Study team now said, here, go do 50 procedures in this airspace supporting 5 airports, and they all intermingle some way or another. So how do you design those? So that's the first action they take is let's figure that out. They're going to define the study team recommendations into an application on how we're going to work this and go from there. Next. They're going to validate the refinements. There's several ways they validate it and look at the impacts. Then they're going to finalize the design process with the delivery of design documentation at 90%. And this is a misnomer, and this is probably the biggest regret that we've dealt with over 5 years is a percentile tie into this process. So I'll give you a story about that in a minute. But really what 90% represents is the team is through designing. They are no longer designing procedures, supposed to. And we'll talk about why it's 99, 100%. I talked about the immenseness of these teams. Smallest team was about 30 people. The largest team by far, Florida, is excess of 80, which would be it's over 80 people doing this. Huge logistics associated with that. All these projects, and I should have said in the study, have a manager and a NACA lead. They co-lead these projects as project leads on these projects. We have a core team that is day in, day out with those teams. There's a MITRE lead, one of the people that Howard talked about earlier that reports to him, supporting that with the trusted advisor role, amongst other things. We have documentation. That's a huge piece of what we do. So there's a contractor. We're on the third documentation contract now. Third company, ATAC, is doing it for us now. They stood up in December and are providing that service to us. PBN, some of the fellows here I see in the field quite often. PBN contractors support each and every project and drive targets for these teams, and are the PBN subject matter expert conduit for them. And I'm looking at Mr. Olsen for these projects to try to be the conduit for anything criteria related to these procedures. Then there's POCs and SMEs that are all part of the team. And then we have a cast of characters. This is the only phase, almost point this out, every phase has these kind of makeups. But a large group of people from each service center now come into play in support of these projects. The FET, Flight Procedures team, are part of this. The environmental service, our environmental specialists are part of this. Safety is part of this. PNR is part of this. I think spectrum engineering, is part of this. There's lots of pieces of the service centers now become technical resources for these teams to help get their procedures in airspace developed and published in the NAS. Industry is with us throughout. You'll see we consider them as a technical partner, even though they're a partner of the projects. We find that the resources, all of us, is limited, because when you do these large projects, you're doing multiple across the NAS, there's actually a small pool of resources that support these kind of activities. Industry's technical pilots that represent their companies for procedure development and meeting the needs of their specific airline are far. There are a handful of them in the NAS. And they're the same, we see the same people over and over at different sites according to what airports they fly in and out of. So the resource limitations there have been an issue for us for a lot. And then PDARS, which is another function of ATAC, for giving us some visual aids on how to develop these. He gives us nice historical tracks in both vertical and lateral to just look at. And then MITRE provides human loop simulation support and national analysis support for anything that comes up during the process of going what ifs.
What's HIDL?
HIDL is a human loop simulation. There are multiple ways of doing HIDLs now, but for this audience, we will take the procedures and put it into a lab type environment, whether it's in their facility or in MITRE lab, where they can actually work these procedures that they think in a new airspace and see how it actually would work, and if their ideas of, hey, I know if I bring this procedure 5 miles further east, it's going to be so much better for us. They actually get to see it and work it and going, ooh, I didn't think about this. It's one of the mechanisms that we use. Remember we talked about earlier, validating the designs? It's one of the things we use to validate the designs, really meet what their intended goals are.
HIDLs there's a number of tools we use. ATAC's got a tool called iSim out there that actually is a fairly good playback mechanism. You can see the procedures, how the interaction is going to work, but it's interactive in that you see the procedures with each other, but it's not interactive in that controllers aren't actually controlling the airplanes and making changes to flight paths based on traffic and spacing and sequencing and things like that we can do in a human-in-the-loop simulation. Human-in-the-loop simulations are expensive. They take a lot of time to set up. They're they do pay off in the long run. We found some things that need to be changed in human-in-the-loop simulations that would have cost us a lot more money to implement the procedure and then have to go back and change it. but it's a valuable tool. We end up with controllers being able from the center to see how the interactions going on inside the terminal facility, and then understanding why they need to change their airspace or their procedure to accommodate what's going on in the terminal. There's a lot of cross-pollination, things like that.
There's been some growth, I'll talk about it a little bit, in that category or in that arena for hills on different fronts. Design package. I left this in the briefing. This whole briefing is excerpt from the administrative briefing we do with the teams. It's a 120-page slide presentation we train the teams with. You guys got the 10th of it. But design packages, I want to bring it up because there's so many people in the service center that support these design teams that are not in the teams every day. It is a document, and I have to admit, I was the MITRE lead for the prototype team for DC, and I found it overburdening to try to keep up with everything that was going on with it, and developed these design packages in order to document the information that was going on for each of these procedures. It is now a mechanism and resource that everybody can use to look at and go, why did you design this star this way? Why did you design this this way? It gives you what the issue was, it gives you what the existing condition is, and it gives you what the team is changing and why. So it's a great resource for anybody to look at and go, oh, I get it. They should be able to read that design package and get a snapshot of the growth or the evolution of that procedure. There's part of the project is a Microsoft project file. I don't know how many technical people have in the room that's familiar with the project. I love it, but it comes from my background. I was forced to use it because I was a staff on one for the entire West Coast for airspace for the Navy. So I had to resort to tools like this. The documentation contractor responsible for creating and developing these to help with the project management of these. That's way they don't miss any steps with the procedure development of all these procedures. A lot of it's redundant, but it's so easy to get lost in the minutia. It's a tool that supports it. Nice. Hiddles, we talked about the hiddles already and why we do it. There are different fidelities of hiddles we can do. We can do portable in the facility if there's if they have a problem or if they want to put more SMEs to see it outside the team. There's different reasons, different philosophies. The lab is the highest fidelity that we do because of the equipment capability. The portable's right next to it after that. And then if they're looking for less complex, less configuration-driven type stuff, the ISO is proven something they can watch and get. Targets does the same kind of evolution. We have developed two things from this from the start. The TBFM hiddle, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, and we're being in FFRDC, we're looking at doing hiddles in the cloud, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Any questions on design? Evaluation phase we talked about, that's that long phase, and if you have a question on, hey, what goes on evaluation other than doing the environmental piece, there's a lot. The first 4 months of evaluation is called the operational validation period, and this goes back to remember said, hey, 90% pencils down, why 90%? Because during this 120-day period, there are things programmatically that may change your designs. You will have your SMS panels during that time frame. The safety risk panels on there may come up with something that requires a mitigation with airspace or whatever. That will change something. You're supposed to have all your final input from our industry, from their flight simulations, for them going back and doing flight cockpit checks. And they may have discovered something that the tech pilot in the room didn't perceive until they were running flight sims coming through there. And any feedback or from the human loop simulations has to be incorporated during that first 120 days. That's how they reach that over 10% and become 100% design complete. The only reason we call it that way is because that is the handoff point to the environmental contract to start the NEPA process for these projects. And you have to be 100% done with your designs and no chance of changes, minimal chance of changes for them to start doing their noise modeling and building the environmental assessments. We do an environmental assessment for every one of our Metroplex projects. That early was deemed, this is how we're going to do it because of the scale and scope really is the big driver for a lot of these projects on why. We originally walked into this as an expedited environmental assessment because we wanted to do protect the agency, do due diligence, and do the steps for NEPA and stuff without making it too costly. That's rapidly changing. We still want to stick to the environmental assessment instead of EIS, and some of the edicts on Metroplex keeps us from being the EIS. We try not to affect anything below 3,000 feet. We're not going to do anything that causes significant noise impacts, so forth. That keeps us from reaching in the EIS realm. Environmental specialists from the service center and the contractor provide that information to the teams and will keep us on track for that. After that 120 days, then really programmatically, it's about doing the environmental assessment. But reality is we're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes for implementation. You're starting work on letters of agreement. We're starting working at SOPs, standard operating procedures. Start working on training plans for the facilities just to get ready for that piece of it. This shows you in the environmental, and this would answer Dennis' questions better than anything, the activity that's going on during that environmental period, the 12 to 18 months. The top period is addressed to the EA, and that's why it's 12 to 18 months. They have a pretty rigid timeline that we can't get away from for some reason. But during that time frame, all this activity, the spectrum analysis should be getting done, RF program should be getting finished, the analysis of the hills, we should have that back and done. We start the implementation planning during that time frame. Your safety risk panels have to be completed during that time. You don't have to have the document done during that 120 days, but the panels have to be completed. If there is a case, and we should never have this, that you require a business case, then that activity will go on during that period. The reason we say it shouldn't, because part of the edicts of Metroplex is we will not do anything that will cause large F&E expenditure. So we don't do business cases.
Andres has left the room, so we're good.
Yeah, because we have done it twice, but I'll leave it alone. And then at the same time, we're doing the benefits analysis at MITRE, and I've missed that on the study phase. Part of that study phase is we do a full analysis on the study team's proposals and look and go, this is the impact you're going to have on that. This is the benefits you're going to see in fuel reduction. This is the benefits you're going to see in CO2 emissions. This is the track mileage reduction you're going to see, the level offs you're going to see, all that kind of information we analyze, and that's part of that study team documentation. Now, all these changes the design team makes, we go in there and take that, because really we're creating a new baseline. So what the design team does, we create the benefits analysis, then go in, this is what the design team should see as a benefit. Questions? Next, you guys are more familiar with SRM. That goes on during the valve. I'm not going to belabor this. Next. Environmental assessment, any questions on this? I think I've hit on this quite a bit. Very good. Next. Airline simulations, they're required to follow these procedures. They're required to provide feedback, and this is all integrated in there. And we're required in order to have that before the 120-day mark of evaluation. This just talks about that.
Yeah, we've got some limited capability in Oklahoma City to do some of these ourselves, but even what we found is the same FMS, the same type aircraft, we get different results than some.
According to the business part that's put into it by the specific airlines, yes.
And of course, in the FMS, you can even set it, on the fly with things like econ values and things like that. They're going to fly the procedure differently.
This is still probably the largest variable in these projects and causes the most anxiety for the procedure developers because of that variance in FMS functionality. Next. So we talked about HIDLs, TBFM simulations. When we were doing Atlanta and Houston, both projects were like going, hey, how's TBFM going to help us? Houston was one of our first full implementations, and they were majorly concerned because the Designers looked at dual flows for both the northeast and northwest corners. They're having flows coming into the airport. And they go, we're really concerned on these local flows merging and coming to the airport, and we need that sequencing tool to be on spot to help us. And we don't have that comfort. We don't have that,
Warm fuzzy.
thank you, warm fuzzy that is going to work there. And so I said, all right, let's see what we can do. We developed TBFM capabilities in our lab where we could actually crack open the adaptation of the software for the TBFM, integrate it in the lab, come in there, have the controllers, have TMU units set in there and going, oh, this works good. I don't like this. Can we change this? Let me give you a little history of what happens in the field. If you're in a facility, in an in-room facility, you want to change your adaptation for TBFM, you make your suggestions on what you change to TBFM. It goes to Atlantic City, the tech center. They change the TBFM adaptation, put it in the system, send it back to you. That's to make a change. Making this capability in the lab where they can play with this and get some lots and lots of iterations on this to see what really works for them. Houston, we did 38 different adaptation builds for them in 4 days. So they were able to look and go, what if? All right, we changed the adaptation. Here it is, it works. Oh, okay, this didn't work like I want to think. Let's change this. They were able to do what typically takes to do one adaptation change and put it back in the field. The quickest I've seen is done is 10 days on the normal process for one. It just saves them literally years of time of trial and error by having that capability thrown into it. It is something that we went for to test some stuff, now to where these facilities have heard this and they're going, we have to have this capability. We've got to look at this before we turn these procedures on in OPDs because we want that warm fuzzy. It went from being late in the process to going back to Phoenix, wanted to change their whole philosophy of how they arrived in the airport and going, TBFM, we got to see if it works or not so we can make that decision. So we did TBFM first for them. So it's a real change.
So we finish, by the time we're done, like Jeff says, with all the iterations with the TBFM build, we've got a starting point for building that adaptation out of the facility, rather than them shooting in the dark for, hey, if I change the arrival stream class filter to this, or the arrival matrix to this, what's it going to do to downstream sectors, downstream centers? And it helps, helps us not learn by the stub-toe approach. You guys, probably the biggest example of the Raptor OPD we tried what 2012, 2013. We had some huge impact neighboring facilities right to India, Memphis, and things like that. So that's one of the lessons learned. We're trying to look at that in the lab environment beforehand so we can get a sense of what those impacts are and how we can mitigate those. Been very good use of the facility.
Questions about TBFM? Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of the Raptor, so the Raptor left a stigma.
Yes, it is.
And,
Nationally.
and it seems like when the Atlanta Metroplex was kicking off, everybody kept referring, and high officials were referring to the Raptor. The Raptor did this, it did do this, blah, blah, blah. What did MITRE do to change the perspective, change their minds?
Very good question. Because of all that stigma that came out in our line, is it the system? Is it OPDs? Is it TBFM? Is it a combination? We went through and did a full analysis of how the Raptor was deployed, how TBFM was deployed, what actions were taken, looked in and give a full analysis of going, there's things you could have done different to help with the deployment of that. That changed a lot of the headquarters perspective of it. It made some of that negative go away, but it still was there. Case in point, you follow up and Minneapolis turns on. And Minneapolis was a field project done outside of Metroplex. And there were some issues with their OPD turns on. And now you've got an air carrier, Delta is the main carrier in Minneapolis as well as here in Atlanta. And then you go, wait a minute, Raptor happened to us, now Minneapolis happened to us, what's going on? So last year, MITRE did a pretty complex study of going, okay, what were the issues? And let's look at OPD deployment in the NAS to date, in all of the NAS. Let's look at TBFM deployment in the NAS and how it's used. And we're able to come back and go in, okay, OPDs or TBFM, those two, one's a tool and one's a procedure. have never caused delays in and of themselves. It's either been the management of it, the deployment of it, on how to do business. And that made Delta really back off. Delta goes, oh. And it was funny, because as we're looking at it, we looked, airlines put block times. So block times are their arrival times to the gate to go on, and this is my planning time to be at my gate when I get into the airport. That's something they do, business case. Because of the Raptor, when they did Minneapolis, they increased their block times. They said, well, we expect there to be some growing pains, so we're going to walk into this and try to help the system out and give some fudge factor for our block times, so we're not a contributing factor to it. When we started the analysis, we found that and going, why do you still have it on? It was months after the fact, and they go, what? And they went back and go, oh yeah, you're right, we do have it on. So this is some of the stuff that we do where we cross all the lines and we can come out there and go, all right, here's the information and here's the factors. Let's learn from that. And it's been very beneficial. Only other thing I'll talk about HITLs, I mentioned it, it's a good place to put it, is we did an experiment last year with Cleveland Metroplex. We're always trying to look at better ways of doing business and better ways to help the agency do what it has to do. So we started looking into, can we do HITLs in the cloud? And the cloud being, it's internet-based activity where you can go on your system and your facility and we can run the experiment from our lab and get the same fidelity as if you came to the lab and do it. Which means the trade con can sit in her facility and we can sit in her facility. We can sit back to the lab, operate this, manage this. Headquarters can sit at their laptop and look and go, let me see what's going on, and hear and see all this real time. The obvious cost goes down dramatically. Like Howie said, these things are very expensive because of all the resources and equipment it takes to do these. Doing it in the lab or doing it in the cloud, it costs us on average about $25 an hour to do it. So obviously you see the change. And when we shared this with the FAA and proved the concept, I said, when can we have it? So we're working on that now. It's probably a couple of years off, but then it adds another option out there. And it adds something, especially on a smaller scale, going, we can do this and not have to worry about a couple $100,000 price tag. Anything else about HITLs? Go ahead, Doug.
No, just time check for you. We have about 15 minutes.
All right, thank you. We're getting close. Phase, this is when we're actually working on, there's a lot of activities, and I alluded to it earlier. We're working on letters agreements, standard operating procedures, training plans, as well as actually turning procedures on. Keep going, there should be a checklist for you. You're going to complete the implementation plan. This is how we're going to deploy these procedures and turn them on. You're going to have completed all the training within the facilities on the new procedures. The Metroplex playbook is something we came up with, Mike came up with as it's really a checklist. What all activities got to go to turn on procedures? What all activities? Who do you got to coordinate with? That playbook is a tool for them to use. Complete the actual training. Actual training from the training plan is conducted. TBFM HITLs are normally done in the implementation phase. As I talked about earlier, we're done earlier and earlier. Flight checks on all procedures so that they can be published. Stakeholder outreach is required. Go ahead.
Good. No.
And then implementation playbook, we actually turn the procedures on. Next. Post-implementation. Next. Post-implementation of all the phases when Metroplex started out, and there was, I call them burger boards. There was a bunch of communications downtown on how do we do this? What do we do in each phase? What's expected? What's the process? What's the steps? The other phase back a little over 5 years ago that wasn't talked about was post-implementation. They go, that's way down the road. We'll get to it.
We had enough alligators already chasing us.
So, the old saying, if you put off tomorrow what you can do today, tomorrow never comes. So we ran into our first couple of post-implementations going, wait a minute, what do we do? We knew that we were going to look and analyze the procedures. We knew that we were going to review the procedures and see if they needed to make any changes. That's as far as we felt. There was a little more work to it than that. We do the benefits analysis. We gather statistics on how the facilities and the NAS is operating with these new procedures, we take that information back to the team and going, hey, here's some stuff. Did you realize you now have impacted this adjacent facility? You might want to go back and look at this. Or, hey, this is awesome. You cut 2 minutes on the arrival time. You got rid of the level offs. Good job. We do conduct lessons learned, and we talk about redesign efforts that there are. How we talk about the lesson learned that we do, it's a living process that MITRE conducts for the FAA during the phases, and then we go back and capture what's going on. The redesign efforts, what we didn't think and what we are just now finishing is how do we close out? How do we hand off? You know, Metroplex is done. Now it reverts to legacy. It's the facilities and service centers. How do we make that a clean process?
Yeah.
So that is something we are refining as we speak. It looks a lot like this formal report, and it captures a lot of the major milestone documents that goes throughout the process, and we formally hand it off to the facilities, and we brief them and industry are going, this is what Metroplex did for you. This is what's left. You own it. Any questions? Give me a call. That type of atmosphere. So we're very much close to refining that now, and that's post-implementation.
So a couple things post-implementation. Obviously, you know, we didn't expect to go redo every procedure that we published, or even in some cases redo a procedure twice or even 3 times. Okay. There's a lot of ways that we're working to improve that. Better QA, better checks on the front end, better builds. There's also the teams get into, you know, I mean, you guys, a lot of you guys work with them. They get into this pretty good. You know, hey, we can improve that. We can cut off 1.5 miles or a half a mile. You know, if we do this. So it's tough, and we're drawing those boundaries now. Or they have program offices, but it's tough to tell them. You know, you can't improve it. You know, you're going to have to close it out, hand it off, and we'll get to that sometime later. You know. Because they're always after making it the best thing.
Perfect. I've heard a lot of them. We can make it perfect, you know. And that once they get into, it's a knowledge, it's an uphill knowledge thing for them on how to do this and how to develop these, and they'll develop these, and that knowledge just continues to grow. They continue to learn more, and they could be well after finished completing the designs and going, man, I just thought of this. Let's change this. And that's something as an agency we've got to restrict and go, no, you're done. Next generation. Do an amendment for your next generation facility. That's the 5-phase process. That's the process we follow. That's a very high-level overview. Any questions about the process as a whole? Current projects. This is where we're at and what we've done. Start from the top. Houston Metroplex is totally complete. Post-implementation is complete. We are done with Houston Metroplex. It is implemented in a large big bang in May of 2014, and we did post-implementation 5 months after we did analysis, and 2 months after that. We haven't touched it since. North Texas Metroplex implemented in September of 2014 fully, again another big bang project. There were lots of issues with closing out North Texas. North Texas is the one we learned that, wow, we got to define a process. We've got to have, how do we go, you own this now, and the national program is done, and it took us months to do that to the satisfaction of all parties on that side of it. So officially, Metroplex is complete there, post-implementation, and everything was complete late 2015, so it took us over a year to close out North Texas. Because we didn't have that process defined well enough. Good lesson learned. Northern California finished implementing all their procedures in May of 2015. That's the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose. All their procedures have been fully implemented. They even have all the amendments for the procedures are complete as of, what is today, January? As of last month. Last month they finished, so they have nothing else going on. So it is totally complete. The only thing left is to do the closeout, and that's planned on April of this year to be a closeout and hand off that project when it's done. The DC project, which several people in this room supported and helped, it was done implementing June 15, and May April or May is their last amendment, in my
March.
number.
March.
And I heard it's being delayed, is that a true statement?
That is not going to be, as far as I can control that, that is not interesting.
I hope you're right, because March is done, and then we'll be done with it, and again, April delivery of the closeout, and then that's 2 more in the bag, done. Atlanta and Charlotte were affected greatly by ERAM. They were originally was supposed to be
Was
done.
it Jacksonville Center?
Church. The ERAM really affected that, and timing is everything. Change in staff and personnel in the Emory facility drug the time out a little bit as well. Some changes in who, what, where, when at the facilities, made some changes. Charlotte is in the middle of implementing. They've got their next big implementation March of this year. They'll be complete May of this year, with anticipated be totally out of there by January of next year, a year from today. Atlanta's got some airspace that's been implemented already, but their first real procedure starts in April of this year, and then they'll be done a month later in 2016, and then those 2 projects we've done. The nice thing about Atlanta is Atlanta has lifted PBM deployment before. They're very comfortable with rolling this stuff out. It'll probably be, I hope I'm not jinxing it, one of our easiest implementations. Exactly. Southern California, you'll see a big TPD there. Southern California was on track. It got slowed down by sequestration, and then some staff changeover in Southern California slowed some things down. But Southern California had an immense amount of public outcry when they were doing the NEPA process. So when they did the draft EA and held the public workshops out there for that draft EA, the agency was surprised about the amount of pushback and feedback they got. So they are just now finishing the public comments that they received just now, this month, as a matter of fact.
We're about 95% done with the answers for them.
For all that, and I don't remember, you remember the latest count on these, but
There were 1,500 specific issues and about 8,000 comments in total, I believe.
which is large. And what we're finding now in today's society is social media is a great thing. They're able to publicize this stuff and put it out there and get more and more people on the great train of going, hey, raise your hand and say no, so we can try to fight the FAA on this. So it's taking a lot longer. That's why you see TBD. We've got to get all that stuff in, got to get the draft EA done, and then we can figure out what the timeline's going to be, because it is definitely going to be longer than it was before. Cleveland, Detroit is ongoing. It started design in June and projected to be done July 2016. Phoenix finished its design actually in December of last year, and Phoenix is on hold. If you know anything about the agency and what's going on, there's been a bunch of litigation in Phoenix over the stuff that I said facilities did before Metroplex walked in there. Lots of concern on perception, lots of concern on what to do. So it is on indefinite hold, awaiting administrative decision on what we're going to do with Phoenix. So we've actually pulled all resources off of Phoenix. We're just waiting. And I anticipate that wait to go on for a while. South Central Florida, by far the largest project ever, is ongoing, and it's impacted by the outreach that I will talk about briefly. Is we're kicking up the flag there. Denver's in the middle of design. Will be done in design probably not March, probably May of this year. Las Vegas study finished November of last year. We anticipate, I heard, in fact, a meeting at headquarters yesterday, that it is going to be funded, partly because it was not on the waterfall, it wasn't in the original funding. Now I heard yesterday that it will be funded. So we'll have a start date on it in design sometime this year. I don't know when, but it will be this year. Any questions on projects? I'm going to briefly go over the changes because this is going to be the last thing we'll hit up, and then I'll give you a minute for questions. Outreach has really changed. Lynn Ray has decided over some of the stuff that's went on across the NAS that we have got to get above and beyond the NEPA process. We've got to get early engagement with community so we can have their feedback and input. And we've got to present ourselves transparent to the communities that we're not trying to hide. Perspective. So the NEPA process, today, we go through this whole process, you do your draft EA. The first time the public gets anything is they get a notice of intent somewhere after the design starts, but really it's just a flyer that goes out and going, hey, FAA's doing this action out there. Doesn't really give them any specifics. Now we get to draft EA, now you have your public workshops, and now we're telling them, this is what we're doing. So the lots of communities, again, social media and stuff, they're going, FAA's telling us what they're doing, they're not giving us any chance to make comments, not giving us any chance to impact, not giving us any chance to voice our opinions. Lots and lots of concerns going. You're putting this plane over my house, doesn't matter whether you hear it, now you put this plane, my property value is going to plummet, now my life investment just went out the window. There's lots and lots of political stuff going on about this that is causing issue after issue after issue. So the agency's doing, we're going to change, we're going to tell them, we're going to start communicating. We're going to put this out early. Those top groups there, the RAs, the airport district office, the airport authorities, are going to be our liaisons on how to communicate and when to communicate. We start as early as the study team now. We met with the RA, the airport district office, and the airport authorities and going, this is us, this is what we're doing. We even showed them the notional designs, this is what we're thinking of. Got any concerns, got any comments? It was a good conversation. There's debate going on when to engage in communities. The philosophy is, okay, after study team 4 design, let's go out there and tell the communities in. Lots of pushback from a lot of us of going, that's not the appropriate time because there are not final designs, they're notional. So if you get a bunch of pushback from the community, it might not even be the design that the facilities actually need. So what's the point? The point is trying to get that communication early. We're working the process as we speak, but the envisionment is at key points throughout the process, we're going to inform those agencies up top and those entities up top, and at least twice we're going to tell the community before the actual formal NEPA process. Once is that period between study and design, and the last time is when we get 75% maturity. The agency feels like the designs are mature enough to at least explain what the intent is. So if there's any wall those from the communities that we need to listen to, need to adjust to, we'll get that feedback then. So this changes the process immensely. It will add timeline, it will add resources, and then it becomes how much is too much for the FAA to stomach on these projects. Yes, ma'am.
Just recently, I'll be quick, Baltimore launched some next-gen procedures, and there was a newspaper article, and it said, if I can remember it correctly, it said, FAA approves next-gen at Baltimore without public knowledge.
Yes, I
And
saw that.
boom, it caused a huge,
I saw that.
storm, and emails and congressional complaints, and we didn't make any changes from the ground up to, I think it was around 6,000 feet, so it's just that perception.
The airport authority was advised. I was there when they
It's
were
amazing.
advised. So it's just, the process was followed 100%. The NEPA process was not deviated in any shape, fashion, or form, but it's that perception, it's that public input that was. Anything else, questions about outreach? I believe that's my last slide, isn't it?
It is.
So, questions, comments, thoughts?
That was awesome, I got a lot of information in my head.
I will leave this brief with them.
Yes, please.
So if anybody wants to look at it or review it, I will leave my contact information as well. Any of you got any questions or would like to follow on information, reach out. I'll be happy to answer you. Be happy to point you in the right direction if I don't know it, and go from there. But
Thank you for coming, you guys.
Thank you for having me.